Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised.
3, 2, 1. Hello, welcome back, Criminal Mischief Nation, to another bonus episode of Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Branden. I am joined, as always, by the great Carolyn Osorio. I'm the Branden of Carolyn and Branden. Carolyn, great to see you again. How was your week?
It was fantastic. How about you?
Good. Home, finally. I've been traveling a lot. I came home with a little cough. I thought I was, 20 years old again, and I figured, you know what? I'll take the red eye to New York. I'll sleep on the plane. I'll grab a couple hours at the airport, and then I could go work a full day on set. No. I slept about an hour on the plane, slept 0 in the airport, and then had to go work a 14-hour day. I was just ruined after it. It messed up the whole week. You don't recover from that in a week when you're 52 years old like I am, okay? That doesn't happen. So,
Well, were you deluding yourself? I mean, everything I know about you would tell me that would not happen.
I had stuff to do all day Wednesday that I couldn't miss, and I had to be on set in New York on Wednesday.
I get the
I didn't have a choice. So yes,
I get the scheduling. Okay.
Short answer, yes. I deluded myself. Yes. Short answer, yes. I deluded myself into thinking that I would be, all chipper come Wednesday morning at call time, and I wasn't.
Well, no, I'm talking about you getting some sleep on the plane, because I said to you, okay, well, when you travel with your family, are you not as anxious about flying? And you're like, you had to bring that up. You had to bring that up. I'm like, oh no. Okay, so that's why I'm like thinking a casual.
Very anxious. I was very anxious the whole time, but I got one of those cool sleep contraptions that you use on a plane. It's not one of the neck pillows where you're all fucked up. It's one of the ones. It's a padded eye mask, okay, that attaches to the headrest of the seat. So you're just sitting there, and your head just goes forward a little bit and just stops, and you just fall asleep. It was amazing. It was very, very relaxing.
Did it actually work?
Yeah, it was as comfortable as I've been trying to sleep on a plane, but there was just too much going on.
You know what? I bet you nobody would ever try to talk to you.
No, they don't. They leave me alone. But you're starting to see more and more of them.
If I saw that, I'd be like, yeah.
I saw it and I went, that thing's super cool. I've got to find it because I want to sleep like this. And it worked great. It worked great. So,
well, I'm glad that you're taking care of yourself.
Yes.
You need to be well. And
yes. Thank you.
I'm glad that your travel stuff is done.
I was reading this thing online while I was waiting to start this. 2 things. Potential serial killer in New England. Have you been seeing this?
No, I haven't been. I've been kind of
7 bodies since March.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
all right.
Internet sleuths are starting to try and figure out who's doing it. And then there was another DNA cold case solved. A 53-year-old cold case from 1972. A woman, like a young 22, 23-year-old woman, and her 3-year-old daughter were driving somewhere in the Midwest to go visit her parents. They never showed up. Missing persons. The recently estranged husband follows her route, finds the car abandoned, and then doesn't find them. And then someone else on a different highway finds the woman's body in a ditch and the 3-year-old sitting there unharmed. Okay. The ex was obviously the first, suspect. He was cleared. She was sexually assaulted and shot. There was a DNA sample on her clothing that they hadn't been able to identify until very, very recently. And it wasn't the husband. It was some drifter who you hate immediately because he's a drifter. Okay. 24-year-old drifter from Chicago who was then murdered himself in 1985 in Detroit. And his manner of death, I mean, he got what was coming to him. He was beaten nearly unconscious by 2 guys with baseball bats over a property dispute. and then he was thrown into a dumpster and burned alive.
Wow.
Yes.
How did they
Yes.
get his DNA?
Genetic, forensic,
In
genetic.
investigative genetic
Yeah.
genealogy?
Yes, there you go. Yes.
But how did they get the actual,
So
because he was,
the woman's blouse, the original victim's blouse in
yeah,
1972 was
yeah,
preserved.
yeah.
And as the technology improved, they were able to get a profile. And
Mm-hmm.
they went to a genealogy company in California who built out the family tree
Yeah.
and this and da, 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 and they were able to act, I mean, like definitely match that it was this guy.
But if he was already, did they have to exhume his body? Was he
I
already,
think he
like
had,
how,
prior to his death, he had probably given, I didn't read the whole article because then I got
okay, so
really,
he'd given a sample
he'd given a
somewhere so they were
sample.
able to,
Exactly.
because usually they can't say with 100%
Yeah.
certainty unless they get to him. So,
I know that they were certain because they said the case is now closed, and this was the guy
hmm
who did it. So I'm assuming
yeah,
if I read to the end of the article, he had had earlier arrests where they had some samples. Yeah,
that's next level to burn someone alive.
yeah, it's like mafia shit.
I I
See,
I
now
don't
also
think
listen,
mafia.
I'm making it a little worse than it is. Yes, he was burned alive. The autopsy showed that he had like charred embers in his lungs, so he was breathing in fire before he died.
He,
But the guys who did it thought that he was already dead when they dumped his because they weren't trying to kill him. They wanted to like rough him up a little bit. Okay. And then when they thought he wasn't breathing, they're like, oh shit, we killed him by accident. We got to get rid of the evidence. So I threw him in a dumpster and they weren't like torturing him by burning him alive.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at you, Mr. True Crime guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'll send you those articles so you can geek out on it too. Um, but yeah, interesting stuff. But I remember this Dermond's case. You know what I remember about this?
I'm gonna say it. Cinder blocks.
No, Cinder blocks was good. No, but I remember the towel dams. Oh
Yes.
gosh, and then the light on the trunk of the car. I
Yeah.
don't know why that stood out.
For me, what stood out, of course, is the great Mac, Cheryl Mac McCollum. I always have fun
Ah,
talking to
she's the
her.
best.
But
She's the
was
best.
also, I love me a true crime confession,
I
honey.
love
You know, like I
absolutely.
absolutely freaking love that. I love that.
Yeah, she's terrific. So how did this get back on your radar? Explain, please.
We'd never done a bonus episode on
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
and it's still unsolved. And I had somehow come across the fact that that they found DNA evidence that wasn't
Right. That
related. Right. So I kind of was like, it's not solved, but I feel like there could be at some point an answer. Having a profile. Now, this happened in May of 2024 that it was announced that they had gotten somebody's genetic profile there that wasn't related to Shirley and Russell.
right.
Um, so I don't know. I mean, maybe they're doing it forensic investigative genetic genealogy as we speak, and they're trying to track it back. Like we don't know. But considering how pristine that crime scene was,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting.
So you don't know the nature of the DNA or where they found it or what it is. You just know
Nope.
that there's a new sample collected in or announced in May of
Well,
2024.
yeah, I think that when I did this case back, a couple years ago now,
Yeah.
it sounded like reading between the lines with Sheriff Sills was that there was still evidence that hadn't been necessarily processed, particularly like these towels had been sent in.
Right.
So like I don't know, and I don't think that they would announce something if they didn't have, I don't know, maybe they did just to put the case back into the, you never really know
Right.
what they're
Yeah.
actually doing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Where did you land on it personally? More than one killer?
you know, I think after I didn't know, but like especially after doing the Truman Capote,
Mm,
in Cold Blood recently, and how people can be murdered for like nothing
yeah.
with no plan and just pointless. It's like was it something like that, where maybe there was, somebody thought that they had a lot of money based on
Well, they did, didn't they? The
their,
Dermonds did have a lot of money.
I mean, I think that maybe they thought they had more than what they had in the house.
Hmm.
Like because they were, 87 and 88, they'd be easy pickings, and that they're like, hey, these people, I mean, I remember thinking that when I was speaking with Sheriff Sills, that he was like, yeah, they had money, but they weren't the wealthiest people on the lake. They didn't live in the nicest home on the lake, and
Hmm.
they weren't ostentatious with their wealth. And my impression was maybe somebody got some misinformation about how wealthy they truly were, and that they didn't
Gosh,
have.
is this another one of those like the episode where they cut the guy's penis off,
Yes,
where they just
yeah,
convinced themselves
I think,
with no actual evidence. There's 100 grand in the house. There's $1 million in the house, and he buried it in the desert because I followed him out there. God, that
yeah,
shit's so scary.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I think that that's where I'm leaning right now, because it sounds like they've ruled out their family.
Yep.
They've said in the profile that, Shirley, was she the intended target because of the way that she was killed, how she was beaten to death, which could suggest some real anger, and I think that's what they said. But
Or
then again, it's
tortured,
like,
like tell us where the money is, or I'm gonna, keep beating
yeah,
you. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Well, then
But
why cut the old man's head off?
well, because of if they shot him in the, if they believe that he was shot in the head, and that's why
So they
you
never found the head.
they never found the head. So they
It's
don't know what the cause of death is.
oh gosh.
But the gunshot residue on his collar indicates that,
Oh, that's right. That's right. That he was
yeah,
shot.
yeah. So I think that it could be one of those cases where they thought that it was that there was more money in the house than there was. But then again, why would nothing be taken? Like, I apparently had a Rolex. Even like small stuff where they could have taken something, nothing was gone. But again, back to the Clutter family, they got like $50,
Yeah.
the equivalent of that. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think just what it takes to cut a guy's head off and keep it is a lot. And then to beat an old woman to death and dump her in the lake. And to your point, it seems like someone had a pretty serious beef with the family, especially since nothing was stolen. Okay.
Mhm.
Like it seems like payback or retribution or, you know, uh, tortured for information gone wrong that went too far. And, so it even maybe to the point of mistaken identity. Or like halfway through, they're like, hey, Jimmy, we're in the wrong house. What? Oh shit. These aren't the people. Maybe that's why they're not saying anything. It's just so weird. And the fact that, listen, professionals, they've gone this long without getting caught, you know?
I mean, there were aspects of it that seemed very professional, like the cinder blocks, and then it was in like nylon sacks, or with like, specialty rope, or not. I'm calling it specialty
Yeah, yeah,
rope.
yeah.
I can't think. I think they said synthetic or something. But I like then there's this motive. What is the motive? What and it's something interesting that I can't remember if Max said this or Sheriff Sills said this. It's like people are gonna, it was Max. She's like, people are gonna gossip because they can't help themselves. They want to think that, Shirley was the one, because I think that, again, as we always talk, like, you want it to make sense.
Of
You want
course.
it to make sense as to why this would happen, you
Otherwise,
know?
it's a really fucking scary world out there. Yeah.
And I think that ding, 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 that is the answer to the question, that this was not random, that they were targeted, and maybe they got some misinformation and
But I'm sorry, that the cops looked into this. The cops looked into if they were into any crooked shit, if they had any enemies, any known enemies, any estranged family members, anyone that got recently removed from the will. They exhausted all of those avenues, right? And and everything was a dead end. Everything was a dead
I know, but back to the jailhouse thing with Perry, not Perry, but Dick
Yeah.
from the Clutter family, and how he said, "Yeah, I worked on this farm, and he's got $10,000 in the safe." He never had $10,000 in the safe. In fact, he never even had a dollar. He paid everything with checks.
Probably never had a
You know,
safe.
he didn't. And so
Right.
it's just like bad information. And you go there and maybe they're seeing, okay, look at they've got this big spread. They live in this, cove. And I think that
It just seems sophisticated, very sophisticated, and the fact that they got away with it just kind of buttresses that opinion for them to then also have made such a massive tactical error, right? To not have all of the information and to go through all of this trouble and to take two lives brutally for nothing,
I know. Well,
right?
look at what happened when the guy that cut off the other, the man's um
Yeah,
private part, like because he was so angry that what he had set up had gone awry,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so the way that Shirley was, murdered, beaten to death could be the level of frustration of like, wait a second, I know you know where this is. Give us the money, whatever. Because there's nothing in the family history. There's no affairs that are happening. Like Max said, if it was retribution for one of their businesses because they own these restaurants, and she's like, honey, it's been 20 years. You've been waiting for a long time if you were getting your revenge. They were retired 20 years.
I wonder, gosh, now I really want to know what this DNA
I know
was.
that's the exciting point because, I feel like if it is something, it could be the answer.
Yeah. Was there evidence of more than one person, like any forensic? Because there was very little forensic
No, there
evidence
was
left behind.
no forensic evidence of really any kind, except for the lampshade and
There were
that they
gloves.
had been wearing gloves.
Yeah,
Right. So I think that, but based on the movement of the bodies and because they're not convinced necessarily that the husband was murdered in the garage,
right.
only that his body was taken there and
Wasn't there
was,
something by the pool?
I don't remember that.
No. Okay.
But they had to know the lake. The Germans didn't own a boat.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know,
Gosh.
Sheriff Sills said, it could be just one person, but it's more likely that it was two just in maneuvering and, but
Wow. Well,
it's hard to even speculate what happened because we don't, it's just, there's no
well,
physical evidence that was left behind.
I don't know where we were business wise or busyness wise 2 years ago, but I must have been way busier that I didn't just have this walk around being pissed off that I don't know who killed these people when we first covered this case because it bothers me now, right? It really does that this case is still open. They're closing these cold cases left and right. Like, let's get on it, people.
Well,
Jesus.
they have DNA evidence. That's
Yeah.
why this is so exciting. If it's truly they have a profile of a suspect profile, which it sounds like they do, they're being really tight-lipped on it, other than they're confirming that yes, they do have
And
a
how close
profile of,
how close is this to Atlanta? Is it's like it's in the Atlanta
I think
area
it's like
or
60 miles away from Atlanta,
yeah, Central Georgia?
85 miles from Atlanta, Georgia.
I, one of the funny parts was how angry they were at the FBI profile.
Yeah.
And it's like a dude who likes guns.
Mhm.
Like,
Right. And
that's
knives.
Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
That's everybody in Georgia. Sorry.
I didn't realize until like just recently, like when I was doing this, that I covered the last case I covered was in Georgia, which was the woman who had the gun on her hip. So, you know,
That's it's a Louisiana is, sportsman's paradise, meaning hunting and fishing and all that. And it's right
hmm
there. Georgia's the same way.
mm,
Um, not like and when I say gun ownership, I think less Second Amendment, come take it, and more like, no, we grew up in the gun culture of hunting and fishing and
yeah,
all that. So it's more that's the Americana gun culture that I respect.
yeah,
Okay. Um, because you grow up not like this dipshit in the black Jeep with the pink grill that's looking to be a hero with a gun on her hip, right?
mm,
No, it's like, the 7-year-old who where a rite of passage is going hunting with your dad at 5 in the morning,
yeah,
and you're taught almost like a religion to
yeah.
respect firearms.
Well, and not only that, but you eat what you are hunting.
Like
You
all of
don't,
that.
yeah,
All of
exactly.
that, all of
Yeah.
that is understood. I'm just talking about the reverence and the respect for the power of a firearm. That the last case you covered, that woman obviously didn't respect.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, that's the kind of gun culture that I appreciate, and that's Georgia for you, like right
And
there.
you're not trying to power trip over other people with it,
No, of course not. No, 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 no. Of course not. Of course
you
not.
know?
No.
It's not something that you're like,
You're not posing on Instagram with your weapons. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know that
I,
bullshit. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But,
Yeah. But anyway, well, listen, uh, let's, I'm sure you're going to stay on this,
mm.
and, because now I really need to know what this is. What's taking so long? It was in May that this,
That's why I'm wondering about the investigative genetic genealogy. That's why I was thinking, okay, that's like a year away that they did this because I
yeah,
didn't
it's
even
been a
know that
year.
they had done it.
Right.
But like, I don't know. I really don't know why it's taking so long, unless like I said before, like maybe they just did that to bring up like, hey, there's, get it on people's radars again. At this point, it's so hopeless that the only way that they're gonna have any chance of solving it is if someone somewhere sees it that hasn't seen it, or maybe wants to come clean or whatever, and they're gonna get more tips,
Right.
or they really do have a profile and they're putting it together to see what's going on with it because
Right.
it shouldn't take a year.
No, it shouldn't at all.
I
All
know,
right.
but you know how, it doesn't strike me as necessarily how it is with this case because of how aggressively they've pursued solving it over the years because it made such a huge impact on this community. But it does take time, but I don't know.
All right. Well, keep me in the loop on this. I'm going to send you those articles about those other two things because they're really interesting, and I think you'll nerd out on them. And what do we got coming up next?
And we'll keep you to. Actually, I will say I want to follow up on some of our other cases that we've been tracking, like the Karen Reed trial is going on.
Yeah,
There's some stuff with the mommy doomsday.
yeah, great. Give us
That. So I think a
give
follow
us a
up is
recap.
definitely
Do a
get a
follow-up
recap.
episode of a couple cases. Yeah, a few cases.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because there's been some
Yeah.
movement in some of. Excuse me. Hold on, I have a big cough. Hold on, I'm going to mute myself. Okay, I'm still around. Oh, and hey, Pope Francis, we hardly knew you. Go with God, buddy.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. And now we get a conclave. So intriguing. Ooh.
Did you watch that movie?
Yeah, of course.
Oh my
Of
gosh, it
course.
was so good.
Yeah.
I
Music
could not believe
mm,
Rafe. I
Ray
mean,
Fiennes.
let me just tell you,
Yeah.
The English Patient was my favorite movie for a really, really, really long time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, talk about nerding out. Like
I
that.
didn't want to say it, but yep. Okay. Yeah.
Did you not
Amazing.
like the movie?
Loved it. Loved it. I didn't
Okay.
say it was my favorite for a long time, but okay. I
Hey,
respect
the
that.
love story was freaking amazing.
Amazing. His
Okay.
performance and the
I,
burn makeup,
I,
amazing. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the Conclave was like one that you wouldn't necessarily think, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing, right?
Yeah, it was amazing.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
And did you know John Lithgow is like 80 years old?
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Stanley Tucci, I'll watch Stanley Tucci do anything. I absolutely love Stanley
Yeah.
Tucci.
He
He's
was so
a
good. I mean,
treasure. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, Conclave,
Ray Fiennes. All right, favorite Ray Fiennes movie.
English Patient.
Come on.
I loved him in that. I
I
loved
did
him in
too,
that.
but I'm saying like, okay,
I just
as a
like,
movie, is that better than Grand Budapest Hotel? I
you
don't
know,
think.
I actually haven't seen that.
Oh. It's Ray Fiennes' greatest role ever.
Okay, well, he was very handsome in
Okay, a
the English
close
Patient.
second is Schindler's List with Ray
Oh
Fiennes.
my gosh, Schindler's List.
Yes. Okay. But
Yeah. You know what? I forgot about Schindler's List.
good
Yeah.
because I mean, it's not a
Yeah.
movie that you go watch over and over again because it's
I
it's perfect and it's
I know.
heartbreaking.
And
Yeah.
it's yeah.
He was so good and it was terrifying. Terrifying how good he was in that movie. Yeah.
I mean, he had that. It's been, I haven't seen it for a really long time, but what I'm thinking about is just how he played that role of like awful, but then also there was like,
There was a lot of insecurity in him also. He played with
yeah,
a lot of insecurity and a lot of making sure everyone knows how important he is. And he doesn't want to fall in love with a Jewish girl, but he kind of is, and he hates himself for it. I mean, he was complex.
complicated, complicated.
Oh man, and just terrifyingly just brutal with
Mm,
the
mhm,
coldness of oh gosh.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ray Fiennes, here's to
Ray,
you.
Ray Fiennes,
I'd
here's to you.
I'd vote for him for Pope as Ray Fiennes, not even
I
as a cardinal.
I
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
I know, but that struggle of like he did it so well about how it kind of snuck up on you where you're like thinking, "Oh, he really does want this." But he's the whole time I'm like thinking he
Well,
really is really good.
it was
And
such an interesting character arc because he's represented in the first 2/3 of the movie as a man with a massive crisis of faith. He's a cardinal in the
Mhm.
Vatican, and he's having a crisis of faith.
I know, but
And then
then
he
all
has
of
to
those
admit to
other
himself that he does have ambition. So that means he's not worthy for it. Wait, what? It was so well
I know it was so
constructed.
unexpected.
Yeah.
And the way that he played it was so like he was discovering it as the viewer was discovering it, which is always so great. It's so subtle. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, and you're thinking Stanley Tucci is the asshole because he's doing his own thing that's more obvious.
Then Lithgow.
And
Oh my gosh, he's the interloper. I mean, just crazy.
I know.
Yeah. It was a great
Yeah,
movie.
so it's a really great movie. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out.
Check out Conclave. And if you liked this episode, please share it with a friend, someone who you think might get something out of it. We would appreciate that. Go over to Apple or Spotify and rate and review the show. Every little bit helps. Until next time, stay safe out there. Anything you want to
Bye.
add, Carolyn?
Bye. Thank you.
All right. Later, everybody.
From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production. Recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself. Music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.